are we ready to start, Gary?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming along. My name's John Hudson from SDRPlay, and we've got a couple of presentations here. I'll just give you a bit of an overview of our company and the basic product, and then I'll be handing over to my colleague Andy here to talk more about the software, SDR Uno. Of course, the product we're talking about is an SDR, Software Defined Radio. So software is at the heart of this, and that is part of the fun and part of the sort of angst of converting over from more traditional hardware-based radios. So I'd like to get a bit of an idea of the mix of people. Has everybody heard of an SDR that's in the room? Or is anyone not too sure? Or everyone knows? I've got one slide. What is it, on the SDR, just to introduce it. So does that sound okay? And we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, and afterwards we'll be demonstrating the SDRPlay RSP2 product, which is our latest product, downstairs. So there'll be plenty of time to come and have a play and ask even more questions. Does that sound okay? Good. Okay, so what is an SDR? I mean, it's the only difference between a traditional radio and an SDR is that we're using software on a host processor to perform a lot of the functions that traditionally were done with hardwired filters, mixers, oscillators, and other ways of trying to process that signal once it's been converted from its electrical form. It's travelled onto the antenna, the tiny signals have been selected and passed forward for processing. So the main difference is that there's a whole bunch of stuff that can now more effectively be done using the huge processing power of a digital signal processor or digital signal processing software running on a PC or other powerful host device. So why do we want one potentially? What are the kind of motivations for jumping into this new way of processing signals, particularly for radio amateur use? Well, one of the things is that up till now, the very nice rigs and radios that you buy are very much optimized, quite rightly, for amateur use. They're perfect for that. They work great on top band, 80, 23 centimeters or whatever. But there's probably a lot of gaps in the middle. You may have some general receiver capability, but when it comes to increasingly the kind of digital modes that are out there, new ways of communications going on, you end up having to do other stuff on a PC anyway, and you're starting to send audio streams into a PC to do these other functions. So why not combine the two on a nice host processor and have true general coverage with modes that have never really been used by amateurs up till now? The most powerful thing, though, is the visual aspect of this, particularly with the kind of HD displays that are possible now with the PC, to truly visualize what else is going on adjacent frequencies, on adjacent bands to where you're operating. So you might be, particularly in a contest situation, working one station, but you've got half an eye, literally, to see a signal that's just, that looks like something that might be DX, it's not too strong, you can see from the amplitude, it's just a voice signal. If you're into a lot of these digital modes, you can actually recognize from the pattern on the waterfall, which is this kind of time-stamped, continuous visual representation of every signal as it popped up. And the human brain is just amazing at adding and using this other dimension. And it sometimes, the analogy is, instead of, for those of you who are into sort of shooting, which a lot of our extreme friends in America seem to be both radio amateurs and survivalists. So I'm a bit cautious of these analogies. But the difference is a rifle, rifle scope. Once you know where to point, you can be very accurate and you can see it all, versus a kind of wide vision, which is needed for scouting around to see what might be there. So the pan adapter or panoramic adapter application is probably one of the biggest motivations for considering SDR, visualizing these multiple signals. Filters, obviously if you buy a hardware solution, it will do whatever it did on the day you bought it. The wonderful thing about SDR is over time the software is being enhanced, upgraded, not just us, it's much more a growing community of third parties and other developers out there adding techniques. For example, again, this is very much a British story. We're totally UK based. Simon Brown, you may have heard of, is the author of SDR Console, and we work closely with him, and he's always adding new capabilities. So once you've bought the basic, even the RSP1, you know, you can take advantage of when he comes out with version 3 preview. Suddenly it's doing more amazing things, giving even more capability. So audio and signal processing, harnessing the power of your PC. You've probably got, as well as your radio gear, you've probably got a PC that you use for, you know, some functions, but it's sitting there, it's a resource, you paid for it, you might as well just add a nice SDR box to it to open up capabilities which previously, standalone, would have cost 10 times. Multiple VFOs. I know a lot of the great new rigs have that capability as well, but that's something that's very powerful within a very big bandwidth. Our SDR is a 10 meg visibility of the spectrum, and you can set up as many VFOs as you like to as almost like separate radios within a given 10 meg span of spectrum. You can actually record all this stuff should you want to for post-processing later. So you can actually, basically, should you want to, you can record 20 meters, the entire band. You can record 20 meters and 80, and come back tomorrow and see what was going on. It's particularly useful for people who are really pushing the boundaries of you know, meteor scatter-based communications. Radio astronomers, they like that sort of thing, but they're actually going to be analysing at their leisure over a time when they knew that there was a lot of solar activity or stuff like that. You can record and play back. There's also a growing number of adjacent interests to basic amateur radio. People, you know, who go to sea in boats, they like, you know, there's more and more you can do with weather satellites, aircraft monitoring. There's passive radar, IR sounds, which is more analysis of the weather from reflections. Lots of new kind of interesting branches to pursue. We had a bit of fun this morning just tuning up, listening to the outside broadcast link at Sandown Park. I mean, it was totally mesmerising, and we were supposed to be getting ready to talk to you guys, and we were listening. Just there was some name dropping going on. There was it Mo Farah and someone else? Must be at Sandown Park today. Anyway, we were totally lots of opportunities to be distracted on frequencies that normally you wouldn't tune to. And finally, you know, can you ever have two receivers? So those are all motivations for considering an SDR. So I'll just run through very briefly the things to consider when choosing an SDR. Obviously, the frequency range that the SDR can tune to. Fundamental in the process at the front end of an SDR is an analog to digital conversion, because you're taking those analog signals straight from the antenna and post-processing them at a particular level of quantization, and basically the more bits the better. Our products are around a 12-bit A to D conversion, which gives something like 10.4 effective number of bits. And the more of this, there's some real high-end receivers, for example, a 16-bit, which will give you, much better dynamic range than we can achieve. At the low end, you've got your 8-bit dongles, which you know, are fine for getting started. But what we've got here is a product that's closer to the performance you could expect with a normal hand radio receiver, albeit with some challenges and limitations, which we'll come on to. Then there's the instantaneous bandwidth. So a lot of the dongles will only give you 1 or 2 megahertz. We can go up to 10 megahertz. That's the size of the RF chunk spectrum that you can see. Obviously, there's a consideration: do you want to be transmitting as well? We only have a receiver. Once you move into the true transceiver mode, there's a lot more considerations in terms of you know, guaranteeing integrity. The whole transmit path is going to be requiring a lot of extra hardware, which we don't have in our receiver. And then pre-selectors, and you'll see as we talk through the transition from our first product, the RSP1 to the RSP2, that we've added, and we're always trying to improve the quality of the filters that are selectable, and even you can add in some notch filters to deal with troublesome interferers. And then finally the price, and we've tried to address a kind of a mid-range point. We're not the $20 dongle or the £20 dongle. We're not the £600, £1,000 flex radio system. We're at the 119.95 RSP1, 159.95 for the RSP2. So I want to say a little bit, just because I think it's always interesting what we're about as a company. I mentioned already we're very British, and it's quite an interesting story. Why are we doing this? I mean, well, some of us, like Simon and myself, are you know, getting on a bit. I'm a radio ham. I've been a radio ham since 1971. I lapsed. I kind of came back into the hobby, and it was a very nice meeting up with some guys from a company called Mirix, and we came together to form SDRPlay. And actually, the chip technology that we use is not the sort of chip technology that is easy to get hold of. And it's kind of an interesting story. And if you go back about 6 or 7 years, it did look like the mobile phone world was going to require all manner of broadcast reception in the phone. I mean, if you think about a smartphone now, I mean, it's a huge processing power. And if you've got memories going back to a few years, you can remember they used to have things like FM radio in a phone. And interestingly, both Apple and Samsung, the kind of premium brands, realized, well, early on they wanted everything. They wanted to be able to provide radio, television, terrestrial TV, other types of formats. And so the company Mirix geared up to address this demand with a very neat chipset which they developed. And they chose a 12-bit technology. It had to be very sensitive because the phone hasn't got much in the way of an antenna. It had to cover everything from long wave here in the UK, which is quite quirky, all the way through to L-band. You know, so it basically, that's why we ended up with the chip. Mirix ended up with a chip that could go from long wave to 2 gigs. But as time went on, the industry changed. The mobile phone guys, they want to know what you're consuming, you know, which they don't really know if you're just kind of receiving off air. Secondly, oh, it's a wasp. So the proliferation of hotspots and bandwidth, 4G coming and so on, meant that a lot of the consumption of audio, video, TV type stuff can be controlled and delivered via bypass technologies, you know. And the last thing you want if you're Apple with your precious brand is to have upset customers saying, well, I've got my hotspot, or I've got my cellular 5 bars. What do you mean I can't pick up radio too? You know, it reflects badly on Apple. So that world changed really quickly. I mean, now we could say, well, wasn't that obvious? But you go back 6 years or so, it wasn't. These guys, who big spenders, wanted these chips. Mirix delivered the chips, and they still have a small business selling that technology into some of the PC industry and other specialist areas. But the formation of SDRPlay was to say, well, why don't we take this great chip technology from Mirix and build a product specially for the amateur enthusiast and specialist industrial lab applications, volumes that wouldn't normally actually justify the millions and millions of dollars that go into doing a chip of that complexity. So we actually have the best of both worlds, and have, for the last 2 years, having launched the RSP1, learned a lot along the way. And Andy will be talking a bit more about the lessons we've learned and how that builds into the software that we provide. But, so we're now 6 people. We're based in the UK. Even so the chips originally, Mirix was in the UK. The plastics that we use are made in Rutland, moulded in Rutland. The boards are all assembled, tested, packaged, and so on in Peterborough via our subcontractor. And we are a kind of a virtual company in the sense that Andy here lives in Kent, I live in Bedfordshire, we have 2 people in Hertfordshire, 1 in Somerset, someone else in Wales, and we all meet up every month or 2. But one is a technology we can hopefully listen to what you guys want and keep a nice range of products coming out. So, as I mentioned already, we've got the RSP1, the RSP2, and I won't go through this shopping list, but this really is the kind of benefits, many of which I've touched on, that you get with an RSP. The one thing I haven't mentioned yet is this strong and growing support network that, I mean, the amateur community is already a very tight, communicative group, ready to point out the idiosyncrasies and tell everyone else where they're going wrong and what they should be doing. And that healthy sort of skepticism feeds into SDR now transitioning into the software world, and it's truly wonderful. Both on our own forum, there's a very active, probably quite US-dominated Facebook group with over 4,000 users, and that's great at enabling people to bring up quickly new applications for the SDR. We'll talk more about the platforms which we support in a minute. There's leaflets actually downstairs, if you haven't got one, that really spell out the key differences between the basic value product, the RSP1, which, you know, for HF use, for pan adapter use, really is probably the best choice. If you're into some of the additional features that along the way we've been asked for, which is trimmable accuracies well beyond the capability of even TCXO-based products, reference clocks, the ability to synchronize multiple units together, a bias T-port on one of the antennas, multiple antenna ports, but one of them which can supply a voltage up the coax to an LNA mounted near the antenna. Again, very useful up at UHF and above where the losses of the coax are significant. We've added RF shielding inside the case, which is, again, doesn't really matter at HF, but for some of the HF and above applications, there's a need to shield the thing better. And we've even got coming out next week a Pro version, which is identical to the RSP2, but it actually comes in a heavy steel box. I don't even have one yet, but I can pass that round. So that's the kind of super industrial version which Martin Lynch will be stocking in a couple of weeks as well. So that's a bit of a look at the mix. Oh, there's this picture of the RSP2 Pro metal on the outside. I'm going to make these slides available. So we need to. Is Gary here? But there's some additional information here, which is also available on the website, particularly on these multiple ports, because this is a big difference from the RSP1. And there's two SMA ports and a high impedance port. And you'll find now, if you go to our website, if you just look on the blog, there's a link to some techniques for connecting, whether it's a long wire, a balanced feed, Actually just a coax connection to people that are using Walbrook loops successfully. There's some additional help. Some people are adding a 9-to-1 balun, which, you know, the new balun, to, if you've got to supply a very long coax cable for VLF. This is more of interest to LF and VLF users below 1.5 megs, of which actually is quite a big community. But, finally, we have our own software, which Andy will now talk through where we are, what we're doing. Are there any immediate questions before I pass to Andy? I'll be here through, and we can answer them together maybe if ever at the end. But are there any?
Yeah, does it work on Windows 10?
It does, and 7. And I think it's still just and Vista and XP. Yeah.
And tablets.
And tablets.
What about Linux?
Well, the RSP1, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Software, yeah. It's interesting, the 2 questions so far, both about software. Yeah.
Any plans to extend the frequency range of 2 gigahertz?
Well, I think we've talked about it. There's not going to be a product in the near future because it will mean moving away from the existing Mirix chip technology. One thing we're looking at is an add-on block convert approach, which we're sort of investigating. What frequencies were you interested in?
2.25 deep space, 2.3 amateur, of course.
Yeah. So we've got a very hard cut-off. Was it about 2 point? Well, we cut it off at 2 megs. But even if we wanted to, I think it really falls off a cliff. 2.0 something.
Yeah, it's a hard limit.
It's a hard limit. But thanks for that.
And you say it's got 10 megahertz bandwidth.
Yeah.
Can that be narrowed up to one amateur band?
Oh yes, you
So
can select.
You've got the band on the screen and nothing beyond it.
Yeah, you can have like 200 kilohertz, 400 kilohertz. In fact, with decimation, you can get pretty much
Right.
what you
down
want.
to 200 kilohertz.
Yeah, down to 200
Yeah.
kilohertz is the smallest. Yeah.
Quick question, how low can we go, for example, if we really hit the submarine transmission?
Well, 9 kilohertz. The RSP2 goes down to 1 kilohertz.
You can see below that, you just can't tune the LO frequency to lower than 10 kilohertz on the RSP1, but you can see down to 0.
Okay.
And the RSP2 we can tune down to 1 kilohertz.
So just thinking of
9
monitoring
kilohertz.
sporadic solar flares, etc.
You get big bang of noise. Recently there's been a lot of noise. You can get down almost down to DC. And it's quite much more sensitive to 2 than the 1 as well. It's quite a slope off on the 1, but it goes right down. In fact, it's more stable than the S5 version as well. You put your hand on this spy version, it tends to move a bit. You don't get that at all with the RSP.
We can do it for you afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. Okay, Andy. Thanks.
Right. Hi everybody, my name's Andy. I'm responsible for software development at SDRPlay. I won't, I think, try and skip over a lot of what John's already gone through, and we'll just focus on a lot of the software stuff. So this is kind of what I'm going to be doing. I'll give you a little bit of the background on the software side, some of the things that we've learned over the last couple of years, and where we're going to go from here. So when we first launched the RSP1 a couple of years ago, we were a hardware supplier that produced a programming interface, and we just expected people to kind of go off and produce a lot of programs. But shortly and very quickly, that turned out not to be the case. People wanted end-user applications; they didn't want to do any programming, and so we rapidly became a solutions provider by having to provide things like the EXTIO plugin for applications like HDSDR. And we worked with Simon Brown to incorporate the programming interface into SDR console. Support initially has changed dramatically because we expected to support developers, which is a whole different world to supporting end users. So we've that took us a little while to gain some traction on getting that support there. But now I think the ethos in the company is we support people just as we expect to be supported ourselves. And we remote log into people's machines if we have to and get them up and running. We do everything we can to try and make sure that people get the experience that we expect them to get with the hardware. So we started to develop the XTO plugin, which was okay, but it's always difficult when you don't actually have control over the entire software interface. You've always got compromises that you're going to have to make because of the interfaces between the two applications. So back in March, we had an opportunity to acquire Studio One, which was already been established as a high-end SDR application. It was selling for almost €200, I believe, with a key, and there's a lot of stuff in there that is very, very high-end, like the audio processing. And so we grasped the opportunity, and that became a bit of a game changer for us, because now we can control the entire interface from the entire user experience, and we can actually now deliver the experience that we want people to get. But we haven't abandoned the EXTIO plugin development, and we won't be abandoning the API development. The API development is absolutely key to everything that we do still. And what we had to do for the RSP2 launch is we had to have something, and we focused our efforts on getting the SDR Uno released for the RSP2. I'll come on to what we're doing at the moment with the other stuff. But we're also developing other solutions such as an ADSB. So we've taken the Dump 1090, some of you might be familiar with, application that's open source, and we've extended that so we can do, and I'll explain that as well. So what have we learned a lot in the last couple of years? The API, because it's in everything, is absolutely crucial. We've made a lot of optimizations and improvements to the API, and we've also added a lot more functionality, which has helped applications and the speed of applications for things like SDR console as well. It enables us to, controlling that level enables us to provide better level of support. We don't have to sort of dive into how people are actually using the hardware directly. And that again helps us to be more focused on developing applications and also supporting end users. And we can also use the API to enhance the control, there are some issues with the chipset like there are with many and it's a lot more expensive to fix hardware than it is to fix software. So there's a lot of the things that we do in the API to make that to provide the better overall experience. We learned very quickly that people want point-and-click solutions, and not just for Windows. They want that for Mac and for Linux. So that's been quite a challenge. And we've also learned that not everybody is or really wants to be a developer, and so that was a bit of a shot in the arm for us originally, because before we launched the RSP1, we were getting a lot of feedback that people just wanted control over the hardware, and actually at launch that turned out not to be the case. So what we're also focusing on are specific use cases. So rather than just developing the software and basically having people to use the software to custom for their use case, we want to learn what use cases how people want to use the software, and we want to put that learning back into the software to make it easier. So on the latest release of SDR Uno, we've really focused a lot on stuff like this. So now you can actually use it as a spectrum analyzer. There's a calibrated power measurement right back to the RSP input on both the RSP1 and the RSP2. All the measurements you see are in SDR Uno are now shown in dBm. You can add external gains or losses that you have prior to the front end of the RSP if you want to do that. And we've got an SNR meter. The S meter is calibrated as well. there are two different standards. So up to 30 megahertz, S9 is, get these numbers right, 73 dBm, minus 73, and beyond there is minus 93. You can turn that on and off if you want to, but that's strictly what the standards are. We've also got things like automatic, so PPM calibration for the frequency. If you've got a solid reference frequency, we have an automated way of tuning the PPM cal. I mean, it's not so much as important for the RSP2 because it's already a very well controlled frequency, but that works for both RSP1 and RSP2. ADSBs are an interesting area for us. So, like I said, we've taken dump 1090 and we've added an 8 megahertz demodulator mode, which enables further. In theory, it enables you to see planes further away, not so good close in. So it's kind of a bit of a. There's an option to turn it on and off, and we support Windows and Linux with it. We will be extending this for the RSP2, and we want to make further improvements to this. We don't have a lot of feedback at the moment as to how the current solution is working for people, but if anybody does use it for ADSB, we'd really like to know how well or not it works, because it's really something that we want to. I mean, there's ACARs, there's other types of these solutions that we really want to develop. Digital decoding is quite a that's quite a new one for us. A lot of people are using interfacing to DSD Plus and JT65, and there's DRM decoding. And at the moment with SDR Uno, you can just pass the audio through to these end applications. We want to massively improve this situation. We want to improve the connection between SDR Uno and external applications, and in some instances we will be putting in the digital demodulation, digital demods into SDR Uno. We can and the DAB and DVB-T we could also do as well. So we really want to try and push the digital decoding. I'm assuming a lot of people here do a lot of digital decoding. Is that quite a popular? What I'm getting is quite a popular thing. So we want to really improve that, and not rely on the virtual cable method that a lot of people are having to use. So where are we going from here? The key thing for the API is that we want to expand on the platforms. So I want to get to things like the BeagleBone Black and Odroid, and I've got some plans for iOS support. We will continue to add functionality to the API. The more functionality we can add into the API, the easier things will appear in things like SDR console. Because rather than having multiple developments, you develop it once, and then these other applications could then just tap into it, and that's the most efficient way to do this. And like I say, it continue the ease of use for developers. We will continue to provide as best the documentation as we can, such that we make it just easy for people to use. On SDR Uno itself, we want to improve the GUI. When we first released SDR Uno, we had so many people say, I don't like all these multiple windows. I just want one window that fills the screen. On the latest release of SDR Uno, I love the fact you can open up all these windows. So we want to, going forward, what we're going to be looking to do is do both. So we're kind of going to try and move to more of a docking approach. So you can keep the windows separate if you want, but you can also fuse them together if you want to create a single window. So we've got ideas on that front. The way that the frequency management is done in SDR was done in Studio One is that the LO and the VFO are very much linked throughout the Studio One code, and we want to separate that out. So go more to I guess probably more to akin of what HDSDR does, where you can program the LO and the VFO separately, and then you can, once you do that and you break that link, You can then apply offsets. We can then do IF output stuff properly. There's a lot we can, once we've done this proper frequency management, there's a lot of stuff that we'll get for free in that. So that's one of the key things we want to do pretty soon. As I said, we're going to do more demodulation and decoding support. So adding better links to external applications and putting demods into SDR Uno where we can. Want to improve the transceiver support, so the IF output is one that I'll be focusing on pretty soon. But we'd really like to hear if there are any other sort of cat control things that you can't quite do at the moment. We've got the complete flexibility now to sort of look at that interface and really make that more, more usable for people. Platforms, we've constantly asked, probably not almost every other day I would have said, whether SDR Uno can work on other platforms and we can develop for other platforms. We have ideas. We have an idea of how to do this for Linux and Mac. That's something that's going to work on in the background, but it's not going to. It's going to be a Windows application for the time being. But we are looking at other platform support. And crucially, we will continue to develop the EXTIO plugin for the RSP2. And we're also going to be, I don't know if anybody here uses SOPI SDR on Linux or Mac that uses Cubic SDR. Anybody? Okay, maybe an American thing because a lot of Americans use it. So we're going to be updating that to support the RSP2 and to better support the RSP1. Because it's not particularly great. We didn't do the first one, and there's a lot of stuff in there we want to change. So we will be doing all of this stuff as well. Just want to come before so to do with all of this. So you're probably aware that the RSP2 SDR Uno is the only application that supports the RSP2 at the moment. The API has gone to Simon Brown. And so I'll be speaking to him on Monday again about implementing the API within SDR console. We're hoping that we're in time to get into Simon's December release for the version 3 preview. So hopefully that will come. The EXTIO should then follow very shortly afterwards, and we'll be releasing the API as well on all the platforms that we support. So that's Windows, Linux, Android, Mac, and Raspberry Pi. Yeah, and then in so next year we want to add the other platforms, Odroid, Beagle by Black, like I said, and we've got some kind of crazy ideas of what we want to do on iOS as well. And there isn't a bespoke SDR solution for iOS devices at the moment. You may have noticed that we've revamped the website the last few weeks to support the RSP2 release. We've sort of reorganised the way we sort of make things available to people. So all of the software is now in one page. You just pick which operating system you want, and everything is there in one place. Likewise with the documentation, we've got community tabs, links, everything. So basically, if you want to download anything, it literally is all in one page. We've also improved the Start Here process, which we'll be continuing to develop. We want to try and make it as easy as possible for people who aren't that savvy with computers. A step-by-step process on how to register the device. Registration is important for us because if anybody ever has any problems and comes to support, having the device registered with us enables us to check all the test data, make sure that there are no issues, so we're just trying to make things more accessible and more easy for people to get to. And then we've got more stuff to come. We've got John's updating the blog regularly. We've got news and we've got some reviews that we've added on there, and we've got a fair number of videos that we've captured recently, and they'll appear on the website. We've got obviously a YouTube channel that will feed those.
Run by Gary Spires, unboxing the RSP2.
So we're very much the ethos of the company is we very much listen to the community. what we try and do is we read everything, so we're always looking at the Facebook streams and the forums, and Twitter. We may not respond to every single comment, but it certainly penetrates in, and we sort of try and navigate our way through. We obviously can't keep everybody happy all the time, but we try and navigate our way through to provide what we think is the best solution for people. One of the things I want to be doing next year, or starting in January, is I want to build up some beta test teams for each of the platforms, and I effectively like some focus groups, and we really want to use those to focus improvements and changes into various platforms, because we do a lot of stuff for Windows. I mean, Windows users will probably account for probably more than 90% of our users. So a lot of the stuff we do is Windows based, but we are very well aware that Linux needs to be supported better. And once we've got SOAP SDR done, we'll be fixing the GR-Osmo SDR library, and we'll be doing step-by-step guides for GNU Radio, GQRX, and Cubic SDR. So that will appear early in the new year as well. So a lot of stuff going on. We're a small team, but we're getting there. Does anybody have any?
We have demos downstairs. I'm very conscious of the time here.
Yeah, we're around all day, so happy to show you guys anything. If you've got any issues with SDR Reload that you'd like to run through downstairs, we're happy to go through those.
You mentioned Linux a couple of times. Is the flavour of Linux important? You know, Ubuntu, Debian, and all that sort of thing, or is it just?
So we started. Okay, so we primarily focus on Ubuntu.
Yeah.
We've recently made some tweaks for CentOS, so it works on CentOS as well. I haven't looked too much at any other flavours. If you're having issues with this particular flavour of Linux, we're very happy to look at it and see if there's anything we need to be doing, whether to provide a new binary, or if there's anything we need to change to make it work on other flavours. We're very happy to look at that, for sure.
But basically, when you say Linux, you mean Ubuntu?
Ubuntu is what we develop on.
Yeah.
But
That's fair enough.
we are kind of conscious that there's more flavours of Linux than I can.
Yeah.
But if there are particular issues with a flavour, we're very happy to look at them and see if there's anything we can do on that. Sure.
Yeah, apologies if you've already done this, but I haven't played with the new Uno yet. Do you incorporate Continuum mode yet? And if not, why not?
I'm not sure I know what you mean by
For radio astronomers, for moon bouncers and so on, you use Continuum mode. Only SpectraView, to my knowledge, supports that at the moment. Nobody else seems to want to support it. It's a very important mode for measurements. It's ideally suited to things like SDRPlay. If it's not in there at the moment, you're missing a trick.
If you want to have a chat afterwards,
Yeah, sure.
we're very happy to have a chat about that and what's involved. We're going to be doing things like fast scanning, station scanners.
You're going the wrong way. No, I need to
Well,
go back to basics here.
Yeah, okay. A lot of the stuff that we've got planned, that's what people are shouting for. So, like I said, we've got lots of input, so we need to try and navigate our way through. But I'm very happy to have a chat with you about that and see what we can do on that front, for sure. I mean, it may be that we maybe take the API and do something like a specific application that's outside of Uno or something. I don't know. We'll have a chat about it and see what we can do. Okay. Anything else? Like I say, we're here from. I'm around all day, so if you want to grab us later on and ask us anything or have a chat, please do that. Okay. Thanks very much.
Convention many years ago.
An easy way of you'll be lucky on SSD to get further that. If you're down on AC, you'll be lucky to get that. I hadn't said it was having lucky in 2 weeks.